Let's be honest, how often do you size someone up in like a split second? You make a snap judgment based on almost nothing. It happens, right? We all do it. But what if a poet from 200 years ago, William Wordsworth, actually gave us a powerful way to deal with this very modern problem? Well, that's what we're going to dig into, how his incredible insights can help us see past our own biases.
Seriously, think about it. When was the last time? Was it the person in front of you at the coffee shop? Someone you saw on social media? Maybe even a colleague in a meeting? We form these instant opinions, and a lot of the time we don't have all the facts. And this impulse, well, it's rooted in something we call bias.
And this is exactly what bias is. It's when we form these really strong and often negative opinions that aren't based on facts at all. They're just based on impressions, on hearsay. It's kind of like writing a whole story about someone when you haven't even bothered to read the first page of their book. And look, this is a deeply human thing, but the poet William Wordsworth, he explored this with such amazing insight. He believed the key to getting past our biases wasn't something you'd find in a busy city or in the rules of society. No, for him, the answer was somewhere much, much more fundamental. For Wordsworth, that place was nature.
Yep, nature. For Wordsworth, nature wasn't just a bunch of pretty mountains and lakes to look at. He saw it as the ultimate classroom. It was the place where we could learn our most important moral lessons.
So let's get into his thinking here. For him, nature was pure and innocent. It was the origin of life, before cities came along and complicated everything. He saw it as a place of perfect harmony, perfect symmetry, and because of all that, he believed it was our greatest teacher. Wordsworth was convinced that if we just got ourselves out into the countryside, we could reconnect with a more truthful, a purer way of seeing the world, and more importantly, seeing each other. And this whole idea is just perfectly captured in one of his most powerful poems.
And that brings us to his poem, Point, Rash, Judgment. It's basically a short story told in verse, and it is the perfect case study on just how dangerous our first impressions can be. So picture this. The story kicks off on a gorgeous September morning. The narrator and his friends are just taking a nice, leisurely stroll by a lake. It's harvest time, so the air is buzzing with activity. And from way off in the distance, they spot two things. First, there's a group of farmers, and they are busting their tails, working hard in the fields. And then, there's this other guy, all by himself, just fishing by the lake, seemingly doing nothing. And right away, they judge him. From way back where they are, they all agree, yep, he must indeed be an idle man, a lazy guy just slacking off during the busiest time of the year. But then, they get closer, and the reality is just shocking. The man isn't idle. He's worn down by sickness, gaunt and lean. His legs are so frail they can barely even hold him up. And that's when it hits them. He wasn't avoiding work. He was physically too sick, too weak to be out there in the fields. And his fishing? It wasn't for fun. It was a desperate attempt to catch even a tiny meal from what the poem calls a dead, unfeeling lake, a lake that wasn't giving up any fish. You can just imagine the impact this had on the group. Their whole carefree, happy mood just evaporates. As Wordsworth puts it, it was changed to serious musing and to self-reproach. They were just ashamed of their quick, cruel, and totally wrong assumption. And to make absolutely sure they would never, ever forget this lesson, they did something pretty remarkable. They renamed that spot on the shore. From that day on, they called it Point, Rash, Judgment. Now, this story shows how we misjudge strangers, but Wordsworth also explored a kind of misunderstanding that can be even more painful. And this brings us to a different kind of misjudgment. This isn't a snap judgment about a stranger. This is a slow, painful misunderstanding that's all about time and memory. Wordsworth explores this in another amazing poem called The Brothers. See, this poem is a really heartbreaking story about coming home. And it's all about the huge misjudgment we make when we just assume that home will always be the way we left it, and that we'll always have a place there. The story's about a guy named Leonard. When he's young, poverty forces him to leave his little brother and go to sea. He promises he'll come back rich and take care of him. Well, more than a dozen years go by. He returns, he's made his fortune, but everything has changed. The landscape is different, his family is gone, and the worst part, his beloved brother James has died, basically from a broken heart after his long absence.
Nobody in his own hometown even recognizes him. He is a complete and total stranger. In the end, Leonard's journey is just this tragic story of misjudgment, the assumption that you can just pause time and pick up right where you left off. The truth was, the years had created a gap so huge that his homecoming was impossible. He leaves, and he never comes back. So, what are we supposed to take away from these two really powerful stories? Wordsworth isn't just telling us tales here. He's offering a guide for how to see the world and how to see each other with more clarity. He's arguing for something he calls a charity of thought. And these lessons are so relevant for us today. First, challenge your first impressions. Always. Give people the benefit of the doubt. Like the friend should have done for that sick man. Make an effort to understand the whole story before you jump to conclusions. And maybe most important of all, just remember that every single person's life is way more complex than any one single rash judgment could ever capture. It really all comes down to this one beautiful, powerful line from Point Rush Judgment. The friends learned what need there is to be reserved in speech and temper all our thoughts with charity. It's about taking a breath, holding back that quick assessment, and trying to approach every person, every situation with a bit of generosity and compassion. Which kind of leaves us with one final question. In our world, which is so fast-paced and so quick to judge, how can we actually practice this in our own lives? How can we learn to temper our own thoughts with that same charity? It's a challenge that Wordsworth gave us 200 years ago, and honestly, it feels more important now than ever.